Hello and welcome to the channel. My name is Bonsai Boy, but my friends call me Bon, and in today's video I'd like to share my thoughts on the second game in the ambitious 3-part reimagining of Final Fantasy VII. I'm of course talking about none other than Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I want to be upfront and say that I have deeply conflicted feelings about Rebirth. On one hand, it's a beautifully presented story of camaraderie, love, and loss that had me holding back tears more than once. And on the other hand, it at times left me feeling exhausted by its pacing and simply ready for the credits to roll. But for those of you familiar with my content and my approach to talking about games, you'll know I make a priority of being respectful and highlighting the positive elements of a game first and foremost. This has admittedly been tough here because I did enjoy my time with Rebirth, but I can't help but feel it'd be disingenuous not to mention the issues I personally had with it. So in the interest of honesty, I won't pretend I didn't have said issues with the game, but I will discuss them later on and focus the first part of this video on how Rebirth succeeds as a sequel. Because in spite of my personal complaints, by and large I do believe it's a remarkable game and an especially great sequel for anyone who holds Final Fantasy VII close to their heart. Before I go any further, I do want to say that I don't plan to show or talk about any major spoilers for Final Fantasy VII, and in fact I won't be discussing the wider story too much in general. I'll also be using footage from my first couple of days with the game, just as an extra precaution. So with that out of the way, let's get on with the video. Now for starters, let's talk about the first reason I believe Rebirth is such a great sequel, and that's how much better combat feels across the board. Despite looking similar and having the same core design as Remake's combat, it's been refined so significantly in Rebirth that I'm honestly shocked. While it's still not as tight or responsive as I would like, on the whole it feels like a substantial improvement over its predecessor. I didn't hate the combat in Remake by any means, but it almost always felt too clunky and restricted by animations for my liking, and as a result, I focused heavily on making Cloud a devastating spellcaster so that I wouldn't have to rely on normal attacks for substantial damage. The exception to this was playing as Tifa, whose more rapid attacks and freedom of movement made her feel far more fluid and intuitive to play. Now getting back to Rebirth, it was immediately noticeable how much quicker and more responsive Cloud and every other character felt to control. The addition of a ranged attack to his kit, as well as the fact that he can effortlessly dash towards a targeted enemy when out of range, really goes a long way to freeing up combat and overcoming the lack of threat indicators from off-screen threats. Another major improvement to combat as a whole has been the reworking of parries and the addition of synergy techniques, which allow you to prepare for or answer a number of different situations on the fly when blocking. And my absolute favorite addition to combat are the synergy abilities, which are special team attacks in which two party members team up for a powerful cinematic attacker ability. You unlock synergy abilities in the skill tree, and different characters have different synergy attacks, each compatible with a specific teammate. What really makes them special though is how they incentivize the player to rotate direct control between the different characters. This is done by requiring the two party members to have spent at least 3 ATB each, and just like in the last game, ATB builds up substantially faster with the character you're actively controlling. So to make the most of synergy attacks, you want to have a variety of them available between your 3 active party members, and then rotate through playing each during an encounter so that they've spent the necessary ATB to use a synergy ability. It reminds me a lot of how Xenoblade Chronicles 2 incentivized switching between blades and party members to build up combos instead of team attacks. But what really brings this all together is just how unique, varied, and flexible the playstyles of every single party member feels. Not only do they all have the ability to take on different roles for the team like healer, tank, or DPS, but they all control and attack in completely different ways despite sharing one universal control scheme. This is truly an achievement in combat design unlike anything I've ever seen, and I don't think it's any exaggeration to say each and every one of these characters could easily headline their own action RPG spin-off with little or no adjustment. My personal favorites this go around were actually Red and Cait Sith. I loved Red because he felt great to control, and I liked how quickly he could build up ATB with his Beyblade-like spinning attack. Cait Sith, on the other hand, was fun because of his hilariously goofy moveset and absurd damage output on offer. And like with the rest of the cast, my favorite thing about both was how effortlessly I could convert their builds to serve completely different roles. Red could be a devastating caster one minute or a life-stealing melee tank the next, and Cait Sith made for a surprisingly powerful glass cannon fighter who was just as comfortable being a jack-of-all-trades or healer. As for the original cast members from Remake, I honestly think the biggest praise has to go to Aerith. While she still feels a little clunky at first, I felt that her system of unique wards and the ability to shift to them were a real step up from her mind-numbing gameplay in the original. Unfortunately, I still think Barret doesn't work particularly well, and his kit still feels kinda boring to use even when it's effective, but he's honestly the only member of the cast I don't enjoy playing as. However, I still wish he was more fun to play if only because he's easily one of my favorite characters in the story. And that leads us nicely into the other thing I truly loved about my time with Rebirth, the characters. I mean it when I say that over the course of my 50 hours with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, I grew to thoroughly care for and cherish each and every one of the main characters even more than I already had. While the side characters and antagonists are likewise wonderful, in the interest of keeping this video a reasonable length, I'll be focusing on our main cast of playable characters, not including Zack, going in order from my least to most favorite, starting with Cloud. While I do appreciate how much more Cloud's personal story has grown to define the narrative, I find him to still carry the sort of bland characterization that comes with being a more fleshed out version of what was a fairly run-of-the-mill brooding hero type. Keep in mind, this is really the worst of an amazing lot, and I still very much loved all the effort that went into making Cloud someone worth caring about. I especially love how his relationship with Tifa is so front and center in his personal narrative and character arc. Following Cloud is Yuffie. Just like I said, I loved all of these characters, so this isn't a slight against Yuffie, and I really found her enthusiasm and youthful energy to bounce off the rest of the cast perfectly. Especially our next character on the list, Barret, who I think does a great job of grounding the rest of the cast in the realities of their situation. While he's often used for comic relief and to great effect, his seriousness and determination in the face of all he's lost consistently reminded me that for all the grandeur and fantasy in this world, there's a lot at stake for everyone involved. Then we have the wonderfully strange Cait Sith. The fact that this weird little cat thing actually has a place in the story is truly an impressive achievement of character writing, and I was absolutely amazed by how much love and care went into realizing his design. Next up might just be the funniest and most surprisingly heartwarming character of them all, Red 13, or as we come to know him later, Nanaki. I won't spoil it for anyone who doesn't know, but this character has some of the best and funniest moments in the entire game. However, just like the rest of the cast, it's his development and personal growth that occur along the journey that really make him stand out. And then we have my personal favorites and the leading ladies, Aerith and Tifa. While I have a bias for Tifa, it was really the way these two played off of each other and the rest of the cast together that made them so special. I met my two best friends of over a decade when we were just teenagers in high school, and I've never seen a video game so sincerely capture the friendship of those two young women the way Rebirth has with Aerith and Tifa. It honestly warmed my heart and reminded me that like most adults, I need to call my friends more. But as I said earlier, I really think Rebirth's characters are especially impressive given the game is a sequel. It's one thing to write interesting characters one time, but it's another thing to believably expand upon their development enough that they can meaningfully grow and change throughout each entry in the story. While these games are fundamentally parts 1 and 2 of a trilogy, the characters still had to be fleshed out enough to spend an entire game with them again and not have it feel like a rehash of what came before. What I'm getting at is that all of these characters have been developed far beyond their original iterations, but what makes Remake and Rebirth so impressive in their writing is being able to give them entire character arcs within each entry without sacrificing their ability to believably grow and develop further in the final parts of this trilogy. I highlight this and my overall praise for Rebirth as a sequel specifically because in a vacuum separated from that wider praise, there are elements of it that I just didn't enjoy or vibe with. I believe there are only a handful of design choices and practices that are truly fair to call objectively bad in any video game, and none of them are present in Final Fantasy Rebirth or most of the games I have the privilege to play for that matter. While this is my philosophy with all games, I specifically bring it up here because there are things I'm going to criticize that I think other people will undoubtedly love, and I want to be especially clear that they just didn't work for me because of who I am, not because the game failed in some way. I do have a couple of nitpicks I'll get to towards the end of this section that I think most people will resonate with, but yeah, for the big stuff, it's all just about my preferences. Now with that little disclaimer out of the way, let's get to my first and largest issue with this game. And it is the double-edged sword of being the everything game it's often been described as. What I'm getting at here is that Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, for better and worse, is an absolutely massive game. Aside from the very first open world area, I basically skipped all side content and still spent nearly 50 hours playing it despite sticking to the main quest for 90% of my playthrough. Now, I don't have any preference one way or another for the size of a game. However, like most people, I will pick a longer game I'm interested in over a shorter one of the same price and get the latter when it's cheaper. My point is that I don't have a strong bias for or against long games like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. But having said that, I personally found that while even skipping basically all side content, it still felt incredibly bloated at times. Don't get me wrong, I love how much story is here, and I loved how much time we get to spend with the characters, but especially in the back half of the game, there are points where it really starts to drag. The final 2 chapters in particular had me on the edge of my seat and glued to the screen as the story unfolded, but it kept being interrupted by fights with a variety of bosses and regular enemies that didn't really introduce any interesting mechanics. Like I said, I really liked the combat in small doses, but it kept feeling like I was going to be able to settle in and watch events play out before being unceremoniously forced into yet another rematch with the Turks or another dungeon section. I never skipped any cutscenes or scripted moments, but even while avoiding as many fights as I reasonably could without becoming underleveled, it took me nearly 10 hours to complete the final 2 chapters, 13 and 14. There's easily a few hours of cutscenes in these final chapters, and I'm just not sure how the average person is expected to experience the ending at a satisfying pace. I play in 5+ hour sessions as a full-time content creator, and I couldn't experience what I feel most people would consider the ending or climax of the story without breaking it up into multiple sessions. Now, like I said earlier, this is for better and worse. While I think this really grinds things to a halt at points, it's also a testament to just how much love and passion went into this game. They really went to the extreme when it comes to fleshing out damn near every element of the original. But it really is extreme. For die-hard fans of the original game, this is a loving tribute to everything you love. But even as a casual fan of Final Fantasy VII, I can't deny that it starts to reach past the point of self-indulgence into being an uneven but admittedly glorious mess in terms of overall pacing. Having said all of that, I really think that Rebirth excels as a sequel to Remake. While compared to the countless games I've played, I don't have particularly strong feelings about it aside from the quality of its characters and presentation. As a sequel, I believe it demonstrates an excellent understanding of how to iterate on previously established systems, especially when they have to both resemble that which came before while also expanding on them substantially. Like I said in the opening, my feelings on Final Fantasy VII Rebirth are complicated. While I have no desire to play it again anytime soon, there are moments I experienced in my time with it that will stick with me for many years to come, and I sincerely believe that this is a truly special game in spite of the elements I didn't personally enjoy. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ding the little bell if you want to be notified when my next video goes live. If you'd like to chat about games or just say hi, I also stream 5 days a week both here and on Twitch starting at 12 PM PST, which is where I play the games featured on this channel and capture the footage used in these videos. Thanks again, and see you next time.